and welcome to the session this morning. My name is Janet Whitley. I'm from Collective Leadership for Scotland, and the session this morning will be hosted by my colleagues also from Collective Leadership for Scotland, so Dot McLaughlin and Verena Albrecht, and also Martin Kalungu-Banda from the Presencing Institute. So welcome to everyone. Now, I guess some of you might have been along to some of our previous sessions, and for some of you, this might be your first session. But just to very briefly outline our intention here is really to create safe space and opportunity for us to reflect together on some of the things that are going on around us, but in particular, in terms of how our leadership should evolve for the next generations that come after us. And so an opportunity to sense in different sorts of ways, to think together about how these different elements might come together and some of the ways that we might want to think about our own leadership, both in these challenging times just now, but in terms of the future and future generations. Now, you'll be aware that there might well be issues that have come up in previous sessions, so you're very welcome. If there's anything that comes to mind, either just now or as the session progresses, put in chat any of these observations. And also we've mentioned before that there's Basecamp groups that are running in between these sessions. And so if there's any issues, if you're part of those groups, or any thoughts that you feel will help others in their reflections, you're more than welcome to put those in the chat function as well. So over the course of this morning, there'll be various different elements to the programme. There'll be some input, we'll be sharing some content. And whilst we're doing that, we will be filming. So just so you're aware, we will be filming those components. And then there'll be other opportunities where there's opportunities for conversation and reflection together in groups. So I guess just so that you've got a sense of a little bit of the shape of the programme. Now, I suspect, again, by this point, many of you will be very familiar with the functionality of Zoom and how that all works. But just in case there's anybody who's still finding their Zoom feet, just whenever I guess there's anybody else talking, it's helpful if everyone else remains on mute. That can help in terms of just the sound quality. And when we go into the conversation rooms, there can be something that's quite beneficial in terms of having your camera on, just to enable that conversation to feel as if it's a little bit more like a conversation that we would normally have with other colleagues in a room. So just to bear that in mind. So the space this morning is intended to be offered to you for reflection on these sorts of questions. An invitation where we can to leave to one side maybe some of the day-to-day policy issues or practical issues that we're grappling with, and to really think and work together on these bigger questions. So welcome to everyone, and I hope you find the session useful. Now, what I'm going to do now is just read a poem from John O'Donoghue, which hopefully will get us into something of the right tone for what else we're going to be working on this morning. So this is called The Interim Time. When, near the end of day, life has drained out of light, and it is too soon for the mind of night to have darkened things. No place looks like itself. Loss of outline makes everything look strangely in between. Unsure of what has been or what might come, in this wan light, even trees seem groundless. In a while it will be night, but nothing here seems to believe the relief of darkness. You're in this time of the interim, where everything seems withheld. The path you took to get here has washed out. The way forward is still concealed from you. The old is not old enough to have died away. The new is still too young to be born. You cannot lay claim to anything in this place of dusk. Your eyes are blurred and there is no mirror. Everyone else has lost sight of your heart, and you can see nowhere to put your trust. You know you have to make your own way through. As far as you can, hold your confidence. Do not allow confusion to squander this call, which is loosening your roots in false ground, that you might come free from all you have outgrown. What is being transfigured here is your mind, and it's difficult and slow to become new. The more faithfully you can endure here, the more refined your heart will become for your arrival in the new dawn.
Good morning, and thank you very much, Janet, for that lovely invitation to appreciate what it takes to live, function from the in-between. And the current times we are living are just that in-between. I'm going to share with you some reflections that probably will add to the thought processes we are going to have in this session. And I will share some slides here. How can we see the systemic forces of current challenges and access deeper levels of knowing? When we look at what we are going through currently, and we see all that from a systems perspective, what is easy to see are the symptoms. The symptoms of a much larger, deeper, more complex system. But it's our job, it's our role to delve into those deeper levels so that we can increase the chances of making sense of where we are coming from, where we are, and where we should be channeling our energies and efforts and actions in order to create the future we want, the future we know is possible. So in the 10% that is visible as part of the symptoms, we are witnessing the ecological divide. We may call it COVID-19, coronavirus, and all sorts of forms of explanation. What it boils down to is the fact that we humans have over many years worked to separate ourselves from nature. We have created an ecological divide. It's like nature and us are separate. And that's why we engage in actions that are destroying nature's capacity to look after us. Indeed, we have made many strides. We have improved the quality of life for billions of people. And we must aspire for that. In the process yet, we need to be mindful that we are not distancing ourselves from nature, that we are not going against the workings and the rules of nature, because we know who loses when we do that. When we cross that line of not treating nature with the sacredness, the reverence, the respect that it has, when we cross that line, it is us who suffer the consequences. But we are also experiencing the social divide, separation of self from others. And again, the current disruption we are going through has shown us more than ever before that separation we have created between ourselves and other people. How poverty has manifested itself more glaringly in these moments we are going through across the globe. But needless to mention, we have also seen the manifestation, sometimes exacerbated by the disruption, but certainly revealed by the disruption, the spiritual divide, the separation of self from self. The many people that we know, and even ourselves, and I speak for myself here as well, experiencing burnout, mental health challenges. Whatever we do to the 3 tips we are seeing there, while important, is not where the real work of ours lies. Our real work lies what is below the waterline. When we get the signs that are coming through the 3 tips, then we inquire into and we act from these 3 levels. We need to go into the structures. What are the structures that have led us to the results we don't want? Our separation from nature, the worsening social divide, and the growth in the numbers of us experiencing a spiritual divide. And these structures are our own creation. They are not an act of God. They are not an act of nature. We set up the rules of how we count wealth. We set up the rules of how we run our education system. We set up the rules of how we run our healthcare system, how we create jobs. We can go and inquire again and recreate those structures. But we also know that those structures don't come by themselves. They come from our patterns of thinking. It is our thoughts that produce the structures. If our thinking is that men and women are not equal, when we thought like that, and in recent human history, we didn't allow women to vote. In our own time, currently, there are so many institutions that for the same work, same level of qualification, same experience, pay women less than men. Those are mental models. If we think there is no society that can exist without poor people, that's not a fact. That is our mental model. If we think there is the them and us, that is not a fact. That is a mental model. So we need to inquire into what are these mental pictures we have that are driving us to create these structures. How we care for children, how we create opportunities for education, come from our thought patterns. However, thoughts don't come by themselves. They are anchored on something else. They are anchored on our fundamental beliefs and values. If our fundamental belief is equality of men and women and all people, we will then have thoughts and structures that are in line with that belief. If our values are about the sacredness of nature and how we humans must work with other forms of life in order to create an ecosystem that serves everyone, then we will function from there. So the challenge we have is not simply to stamp out the tips of the iceberg, the symptoms. The big challenge we have is to inquire into what are the structures that are giving us the results we don't want. What are our current thought patterns that are locking us into these cycles that are actually taking away life and well-being from us? And underneath there, truly, what are our fundamental beliefs and values about life, about relationships, about nature? What do we truly believe is the case? To be able to work in this systemic way, we need to relearn how to switch on at least 3 faculties of intelligence or knowing. We humans don't just think with our brains. We humans are gifted indeed with an open mind. The ability to play with and access multiple possibilities, to be open to information, data, evidence, experience. What stands in the way of the open mind is the voice of judgment. That chatterbox that is in every one of us that makes quick conclusions even without waiting for data, for information, for experience. But I must say, the voice of judgment is in each one of us. So that's not the problem. The problem is when we do not learn how to suspend the voice of judgment so that we can allow our open mind to access new data, new information, new experiences. The antidote to the voice of judgment is curiosity. What's going on here? Where has this come from? How can we learn about this? What else is needed? Where can we go to find out more about why this is working or not working? Curiosity is what allows us to suspend our voice of judgment, and then we unleash the might and the power of the open mind. We humans also think with our hearts, not just figuratively, but in real terms. Through the vagus nerve, our hearts sends more messages to the brain than the other way around, scientists tell us. But also throughout many traditional wisdoms, throughout history, humans all over the world have known that we do not simply think. We do not simply access knowing through the brain. We do access knowing through our hearts. In many traditional wisdoms, in languages as well, there is the equivalent of my heart told me. What tends to stand in the way of the intelligence of the open heart is the voice of cynicism. Cynicism is close to judgment. The slight difference here is cynicism, a fundamental disbelief in what might be possible but not familiar to me. Because something is not familiar to me, I quickly label it stupid, can't work, impossible. Just a few months ago, there were many organizations that thought they couldn't do meaningful work online. And therefore, they dismissed engagement online, or we dismissed engagement online as silly, mere wishful thinking. But look at how we are learning together in a very fundamental way 6 months down the line. That voice 6 months ago, I would call it the voice of cynicism. What we need to do is to learn to redirect our cynicism so that then we can switch on the power of the open heart. The heart as a tool, as a faculty of knowing and making sense of the world. The antidote to the voice of cynicism is compassion, the capacity to connect with others, but not just others as in humans. It is the capacity to connect with nature as well. In my tradition, I am originally from Zambia in Southern Africa. And in Africa, we do have the concept of Ubuntu. My well-being is inseparable from your well-being. I cannot talk about success at my personal level if you are not successful. But I also learned that the concept of Ubuntu also means you have compassion for those who will live long after you have died. We humans have the capacity to connect with our grandchildren's grandchildren. And that's why we do things in a long-term perspective way. We can do things which we know we are not going to benefit from in our lifetime, but we know that our children will benefit from that. Our children's children will benefit from that. The heart allows us to know that. The third faculty of intelligence is the open will, which sometimes get masked by the voice of fear. Open will is that experience in all of us when we know we have no choice but to act. All of us have experienced those moments when we knew something that we lost the freedom not to know. There is a point of awareness in all of us about certain things that we cannot not do. We lose the freedom not to act. What tends to stand in the way of us taking action for the things we know we must is simply the voice of fear. How will they think about me? Will I keep my job? Will I keep my contract? Will I be seen in that way, in this way? It's that fear which stands in the way. Fear is good, but not when it takes control of us all the time. And therefore, what is the antidote to fear? It is courage. And courage is not absence of fear, as we all know. It is the ability to engage in dialogue with fear. Fear, why are you here? What are you trying to alert me to? What should I not ignore? That dialogue with fear helps us to unleash the power and the wisdom of the open will. Now, almost to pick from where Una left, the need to create space for reflection. We, in this program, also created this little pocket for that reflection, Una and all of us. So for the next 15 or so minutes, I will ask you a few questions. Please do not write the questions down, because if you want those questions later, they can be shared with you. Care more about writing your thought processes. I'm pretty sure we are all familiar with journaling now. It's just a question of taking your journal and your pen. You hear the question. Without much thinking, allow your hand to do the work. Allow your hand to do the thinking. I have 7 questions for you. Roughly a minute per question. A few seconds more than just a minute. And I will indicate when the next question is coming. And even if you haven't completed your sentence, you stop mid-sentence and listen to the next. And as we get ready, may I invite you to sort of just take 3 deep breaths. You may lower your gaze or close your eyes, feeling your feet firmly planted on Mother Earth, with your back straight, allowing your spine to support your body's natural dignity. And then take those 3 deep breaths. And as you switch on your heart as a place for knowing, extend your empathy to people in your family, your loved ones. To your co-workers in whichever configuration you do work. Extend that empathy to your community, your country, and the whole world. I invite you to extend that empathy to your distant relatives, aunties and uncles and grandparents, great-grandparents. Empathize with your children, your nieces and nephews, grandchildren. Future generations that you will never meet in the physical way that we meet. Then coming back to the present moment, empathize with this community you are seeing online. May I now ask you to take your notebook, journal, and pen, and let's go through the following 7 questions of reflecting together. Question 1. In the last few months, we have lived and worked under unprecedented disruption. What have you noticed about yourself? In the last few months, we have lived and worked under unprecedented disruption. What have you noticed about yourself? Next question. What are your most important sources of energy and happiness in your personal and professional life? What are your most important sources of energy and happiness in your personal and professional life? Next question. What is it about your current personal and professional life that frustrates you the most? What is it about your current personal or professional life that frustrates you the most? Question 4. Look at your current situation from the point of view of yourself as a young person at the beginning of your life's journey. What does that younger you have to say to your current self? What does that younger you have to say to your current self? Question 5. Imagine you could fast forward your life to that very last moment when it's time for you to pass on, to die. And somehow at that point, you get the chance to have the last look at your footprint on earth. What would you like to see at that moment? What is the legacy you would like to see having left behind? Question number 6. Even as we go through this huge COVID instigated disruption, what is your vision for the next 2 to 3 years? Try and describe that as much as possible. Yes, we are going through unprecedented times. But what would be your vision for the next 2 to 3 years? Seventh and final question. What do you have to let go of in order to bring your vision to reality? What is the old stuff that must die? What is the old skin that you need to shed? What would you have to let go of in order to bring your vision into reality?
Okay, thank you, Martin, and thank you for those questions. What we're going to invite you to do now is to really move on from what's come up in terms of your journaling and really get a sense from all of that of what is wanting to be born through my work. So that kind of overarching question. And we're going to invite you to go into smaller groups so you can just have a conversation around that. So I guess just to add my thanks to everyone and to everyone else's comments, it feels as if there has been that connection that we were hoping to provide the opportunity for. And of course, there's plenty of opportunities to stay involved. So our next leadership conversation with Martin is in 2 weeks' time on Tuesday. And as Dawn kind of has signalled in some senses, that's starting to move us into some of the ideas about experimentation and flexing the muscle of action around some of the ideas that we've been talking about. But also through the wider work of collective leadership, there's plenty of other opportunities to connect with one another. Dot's mentioned the Basecamp groups. We've got guided journaling sessions that we offer each week, and there's another batch of sessions that have just been added because the feedback that we've been receiving is that people do value that time and that structured opportunity for reflection, alongside opportunities for creativity, workshops, and of course, images for renewal is another strand of that as well. So if you're feeling that this is something that you want to be more fully involved with, or something that you'd like to draw your colleagues into, there's lots of other opportunities to be involved. But otherwise, thank you very much for being part of our community this morning, and have a good day.